What if I told you that the very first Memorial Day wasn't organized by presidents or generals or, a congressional committee?
Right, definitely not the usual suspect.
Yeah, exactly. What if it was actually led by 10,000 newly freed Black Americans standing over a mass grave in a former Confederate prison camp?
I mean, it completely shatters the image most of us have for the last weekend in May, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because we usually just picture, the unofficial start of summer, beaches opening up, theme parks unlocking their gates, the smell of backyard barbecues.
Right.
But the actual root of the holiday is anchored in this incredibly raw, immediate, and highly localized grief that has just been almost entirely paved over.
Okay, so let's unpack this because today we are leaving the modern barbecues behind and we're traveling back to Charleston, South Carolina in the spring of 1865.
Sounds like a plan.
And just to give you an overview of the sources we're unpacking today, we are looking at some really extensive reporting from the Chicago Crusader and the Black Wall Street Times. And these sources, they dive into some incredibly raw, charged political history.
Oh, absolutely. Very sensitive stuff.
Yeah, they touch on everything from the history of the Confederacy, the actions of white Democrats in 1876, all the way up to ongoing struggles for civil rights. And just to be totally upfront with you, the listener, our goal today is not to take political sides or endorse any specific viewpoints.
Right. That's not what we're here for.
Exactly.
Right.
We are strictly here to impartially lay out these fascinating historical facts and perspectives exactly as the sources reported them.
Which is such a crucial foundation for this deep dive. Because, we aren't merely looking at the trivia of how a single holiday started.
Right. It's bigger than that.
So much bigger. We are really looking at the mechanics of collective memory. Like, how does a nation decide which stories make it into the history books and which ones are just deliberately forced into the shadows?
And to even begin answering that, we kind of have to talk about how the story was pulled out of those shadows in the first place. Because for over a century, the events of May 1865 in Charleston were totally lost to the mainstream public.
Completely forgotten.
Yeah. It actually took a renowned Yale University professor named David Blight doing archival digging at Harvard for a book he was writing called Race and Reunion to find the breadcrumbs.
And it's wild how he found it. He was just sifting through these old, seemingly mundane records when he stumbled upon a really delicate newspaper clipping from the New York Herald Tribune.
Just sitting in a box.
Yeah, basically. Someone had glued this fragile little piece of paper to a piece of cardboard and just scribbled a label on it that said First Decoration Day.
That makes me think of like an old VHS tape. You know when you record a family video over an old television broadcast, but you don't erase it completely?
Oh, yeah, and you can still see the old show in the background.
Exactly. The original footage is still there underneath, heavily distorted, just waiting for someone to look closely at the static. And Blight spots the static, thinks, praise God, I hope this is true, and he just starts hunting for corroboration.
Which he actually finds, right?
He does. He finds it in the Charleston Daily Courier and other firsthand accounts. But the picture those reporters painted requires us to really understand just how grim Charleston was at the end of the Civil War.
Right, and the location of these events is key. It's a place called the Washington Racecourse and Jockey Club.
Okay, a race course.
Yeah, but to understand the gravity of what happened there, you have to picture its original state. This was a glaring symbol of antebellum wealth. And antebellum just refers to the pre-war period in the South, which was characterized by this massive, hyper-wealthy plantation class.
So this was a place for the elite.
Exactly. This racetrack was where the Southern elite went for absolute luxury and leisure.
But the sources describe this terrifying transformation by the final year of the war. Basically, the Confederacy took this hub of extreme luxury and turned it into an open-air prison for captured Union soldiers.
What's fascinating here is the stark juxtaposition of the physical space. I mean, the grandstands where wealthy elites used to sip drinks and place bets literally became the walls of a horrific detention center.
That is just wow.
Yeah, and the captured soldiers were completely exposed to the elements. Disease ran rampant. Starvation was super common.
It sounds like a nightmare.
It was. At least 257, and some sources estimate over 200 Union soldiers died right there on that dirt.
Oh my God.
And because it was an active war zone and a prison camp, there was zero dignity in death. Confederate guards just simply tossed the bodies into a shallow mass grave right behind the grandstand.
And that lack of dignity, leaving human beings in a ditch like that, it was viscerally unacceptable to the newly freed Black population of Charleston.
Completely unacceptable.
Because by early 1865, the wealthy white residents had largely abandoned the city as Union forces approached, and they just left the black population behind. And less than a month after the Confederacy officially surrendered, a group of black volunteers decided to correct this atrocity.
Right, 28 black workmen walked into that abandoned racetrack.
And I want to pause on the physical reality of what those 28 men did, because they didn't have, like, heavy machinery.
No, not at all.
Over a period of weeks, they dug into a mass grave by hand. They systematically exhumed the decomposing bodies of 257 men.
Just incredible.
And they gave every single soldier a proper individual burial. And then they built a 10-foot-high white wooden fence completely enclosing the new cemetery. They constructed an archway over the entrance and hand-painted the words, "Martyrs of the Racecourse."
Is just a staggering labor of deep reverence.
Yeah.
I mean, they turned a site of trauma into what they officially named Union Cemetery. But as incredible as that physical labor was, it really merely set the stage for what happened next.
Right, May 1st, 1865. And just to put this in perspective for you, this is only weeks after the war ended. Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia was barely a year old at this point.
Wow. All right.
And down in Charleston, an estimated 10,000 people gathered at this newly whitewashed cemetery.
10,000 people. I mean, that is a logistical marvel for a war-torn city in 1865. And the vast majority of the crowd were newly freed black residents, accompanied by some white northern missionaries.
The sensory details from the sources are just incredible to read. At 9 a.m., 3,000 black schoolchildren led the procession.
3,000 kids.
3,000 kids, carrying armfuls of fresh roses, marching and singing John Brown's Body. And they were followed by hundreds of black women carrying baskets of flowers, wreaths, and crosses to lay on the fresh dirt.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah, and they sang, "We'll rally around the flag," the Star-Spangled Banner, and various spirituals.
And the sheer volume of flowers actually covered the grave so completely that reporters noted it looked like one massive mound of rose petals.
That is beautiful.
It really is. But it wasn't solely a civilian gathering either. There was a highly structured military presence. The 21st U.S. Colored Infantry led the march up Charleston's prominent meeting street. You also had the 34th and 104th Colored Troops and the 54th Massachusetts U.S. Colored Troops, the famous regiment portrayed in the movie Glory. They marched into the cemetery and actually performed a complex double-column march around the graves.
Right, and there were sermons, scripture readings, picnics, and speeches all day.
It was a massive event.
Yeah, and to fully grasp the magnitude of this, you really have to look at the psychological reality of those colored infantry regiments.
What do you mean?
Well, for a white Union soldier, capture meant becoming a prisoner of war, which is horrific, yes, but it was governed by certain rules. For a black Union soldier, capture carried the very real threat of summary execution right on the battlefield.
Just immediate execution or being sold directly into slavery. Their uniforms literally made them targets. So for those specific troops to march in formation through the heart of Charleston, past the former slave markets, to honor their fallen comrades, it is a profound display of power and liberation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because of that context, this wasn't just a funeral.
No. Not at all. David Blight actually refers to this event as the Independence Day of a Second American Revolution.
Wow.
Think about the timeline. Just weeks prior, many of the 10,000 people in that crowd were considered literal property under the law.
Right.
They had no guaranteed safety, no defined constitutional rights, no certainty about what tomorrow would bring.
Yeah.
Yet their very first collective public action as free people was to claim public space and express immense gratitude.
Yeah, they were using their feet, their songs, and their military formations to declare exactly what the Civil War had been fought for.
Exactly.
Okay, wait, I have to stop here. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the logistics of collective amnesia.
It's a lot of process.
Because if you have 10,000 people parading through a city, and if you have national reporters from the New York Herald Tribune taking notes, if Harper's Weekly is publishing sketches of the cemetery, how does it physically disappear from the history books?
That's the big question.
Like, did they burn the archives? Was there a literal cover-up?
It's honestly the most chilling part of the entire narrative because it reveals the actual mechanisms of historical erasure. It doesn't happen by accident, and people don't just, forget. It requires active systemic suppression. During the immediate post-war period, which we know as Reconstruction, federal troops remained in the South, and that allowed for events like this memorial to happen. But the political winds eventually shifted.
As they do.
Right. By 1876, following a highly contested presidential election, a compromise was reached that pulled federal troops out of the South, and white Democrats regained absolute control of South Carolina politics.
So they essentially got the power to rewrite the script of the city.
Exactly. And this is the era when the lost cause ideology really took root.
And just for context, the lost cause was that pseudo-historical movement, right?
Yes. It sought to romanticize the Confederacy, portraying it as a noble defense of states' rights while aggressively downplaying the horrors of slavery. So a massive, joyful celebration of Union soldiers by 10,000 newly freed black citizens contradicted that myth entirely.
It completely blew a hole in it. But how did they actually silence 10,000 witnesses?
Through institutional control and terror. When the white establishment regained power, they controlled the school boards.
Meaning they dictated what went into the textbooks.
Precisely. And they controlled the city permits, meaning black residents could no longer hold massive public gatherings without facing violence. They erected towering Confederate monuments in public squares to visually claim the space.
So they basically pushed it out of the public square.
Yeah, the black community kept the memory alive privately in their churches and families, but publicly the narrative was suffocated.
And that suffocation created a vacuum. With Charleston's 1865 event forced underground, other predominantly white cities rushed in to claim the title of First Memorial Day.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources mention Richmond, Virginia, claiming an event in 1861. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, pointed to 1863. Carbondale, Illinois, claimed 1866.
And the formalization happened in 1868 when General John A. Logan, who was the commander of a major Union veterans organization, declared May 30th as a nationwide day of remembrance.
Why May 30th?
He specifically chose that date because it didn't align with the anniversary of any particular battle. He wanted a generalized day of mourning.
And then the federal government stamped its own official version into law a century later. Because in 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson officially declared Waterloo, New York, as the birthplace of Memorial Day.
Yep.
And through all those official proclamations and textbook rewrites, the martyrs of the race course just vanished from the mainstream record.
But the erasure wasn't only on paper, you know. We really have to look at what happened to the actual dirt in Charleston.
What do you mean?
The cemetery didn't survive the political shift either. In the 1880s, the physical evidence was removed. The bodies of those 257 soldiers were exhumed again and relocated to a national cemetery in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Wait, if they moved the bodies, what happened to the 10-foot fence in the archway? Someone had to have seen it in the early 1900s, right?
It was torn down.
You're kidding.
No, the sacred burial ground went through a series of bizarre and almost insulting transformations. By 1932, the city repurposed the land and turned the former cemetery into a municipal zoo.
A zoo.
A zoo.
They put animal cages on the site of a mass grave and a liberation monument.
They did, and the transformation continued. By 1975, the zoo was gone, and the area was redeveloped into a sprawling 60-acre public space featuring lush gardens, ponds, and a gazebo.
Okay, so a park.
Yeah, it is a beautiful park today. But the deep irony here, which perfectly illustrates the mechanics of the Lost Cause narrative, is the name the city chose for it.
Oh no, what is it?
It is called Hampton Park, named after Confederate General Wade Hampton III.
Who, at the time of the Civil War, was one of the largest slaveholders in the entire South.
Exactly.
Let that sink in. The very site where newly freed Black Americans created a sacred monument to their liberation was paved over and named after a man who literally fought to keep them enslaved.
It's just a breathtaking level of historical dissonance. And unfortunately, as the Black Wall Street Times points out, the burial of the 1865 ceremony is just a microcosm of a much broader pattern in American history regarding the treatment of black military service.
Right. It's not just one parade in Charleston.
You know, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the statistics from the Civil War alone are undeniable. Historical reports indicate that between 90,000 and 179,000 black soldiers fought for the Union.
Wow.
And roughly 40,000 of them died. And they fought under systemic inequality. The sources note they faced inferior equipment, inadequate medical care, and notoriously unequal pay, often receiving substantially less money than their white counterparts for doing the exact same fighting.
And that dynamic, fighting for a nation that denies your basic rights, it echoes through every subsequent generation.
It really does.
The sources draw a direct undeniable line from those Civil War soldiers to the Buffalo Soldiers on the western frontier.
Right.
From them to the 92nd and 93rd Infantry Divisions fighting in the trenches of World War I, and straight through to the Tuskegee Airmen of World War II. In every major conflict, Black service members fought and died defending a nation abroad that actively treated them as second-class citizens at home.
Which brings a heavy, necessary resonance to how we view the present day. Because for many Black veterans, Memorial Day is an incredibly complex observance.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It is fundamentally a day to honor fallen heroes, but it simultaneously serves as a stark reminder of decades of systemic discrimination.
Yeah, the soldiers who died in that open-air prison in Charleston didn't lay down their lives so we could, score a discount on a mattress or spend a 3-day weekend at a theme park.
Definitely not.
They died for the promise of full citizenship, for the right to vote, to be fairly represented, to simply exist equally in a democracy. And the sources are very clear that those specific rights continue to face ongoing challenges and debates today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there is a crucial counterweight to this story of erasure. History, no matter how deeply it gets buried, has a remarkable habit of surfacing.
It really does.
And in Charleston, the local community has taken powerful, tangible steps to force the true history back into the light.
Let's talk about that, because fast forward to 2010 and something extraordinary finally happens at Hampton Park.
Right.
Right near a reflecting pool on those 60 acres, a bronze plaque was officially dedicated, formally commemorating the site as the location of the first Memorial Day on May 1st, 1865.
And the attendance at that 2010 dedication speaks volumes about the impact of the newly unearthed history.
Who was there?
You had the city's mayor, Joe Riley, participating. There was a brass band and a historical reenactment by members of the Massachusetts 54th Regiment.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And Dot S. Scott, who was the president of the local NAACP branch at the time, was present. She gave an incredibly candid quote to the Crusader, admitting that the dedication was an absolute revelation to her.
Wait, really?
Yeah, she wasn't even aware of the history of the race course prior to that event.
That blew my mind. The fact that a local civil rights leader was unaware of a 10,000-person civil rights milestone in her own city just proves how effectively the political mechanisms of the 1870s silenced the narrative.
It's honestly terrifying how well it worked.
It is, but the reclamation at the park didn't stop with a single bronze plaque. The park also unveiled a major statue of Denmark Vesey, a crucial Black liberation figure, and one of the founders of the historic Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church.
And the sculptor behind that statue is a fascinating figure in his own right.
Ed Dwight, right.
Yes. Ed Dwight, who was actually a former NASA astronaut applicant before becoming a highly acclaimed sculptor, crafted the monument. And placing a towering statue of a Black liberation figure alongside a plaque honoring Black historical agency, squarely inside a park named after a Confederate general, it forces a visceral, unavoidable dialogue between those competing histories.
It really does. So what does this all mean? We've traced an incredible journey today. From a neglected cardboard clipping in a Harvard archive to a meticulously organized 10,000-person parade of newly freed Americans singing over a reclaimed cemetery.
Right.
We've examined the deliberate political mechanisms used to silence that day and the modern efforts to literally carve that truth back into the stone of our public spaces.
And what it ultimately means is that memory isn't a passive vault. It is an active, ongoing process.
Yeah.
Reclaiming the Charleston history, as our sources emphasize, isn't about angrily replacing one story with another.
Right. It's not a zero-sum game.
Exactly. It isn't about stripping the meaning of Memorial Day away from Waterloo, New York, or any other community that honors the fallen. It is about demanding the complete story of American sacrifice.
Well said.
It requires us to recognize that the earliest, most visceral observance of this hallowed day was pioneered by Black Americans who understood, perhaps more intimately than anyone else in the nation, the exact devastating cost of freedom.
It fundamentally changes the DNA of the holiday. You can't really look at a long weekend the same way once you know how it was forged.
You really can't.
Yeah.
And I'd offer this final thought for you to consider as we wrap up.
Okay.
Think about the literal layers of earth this specific story took place on. A hyper-wealthy racetrack, violently transformed into a horrific prison camp.
Right.
Then reclaimed and transformed into a sacred whitewashed memorial built by the callous hands of freedmen. Then paved over and reduced to a city zoo. Then re-landscaped into a municipal park named after a slaveholding general, which now, finally, holds a bronze plaque honoring those same freedmen.
That is just a staggering amount of human history compressed into a single plot of land.
It is. And if the very earth beneath our feet can hold that many layered, conflicting, and deeply buried histories, it makes you wonder, what incredible, deliberately forgotten stories are hiding right under the surface of the spaces you walk through every single day?
That is a profound question to carry with you the next time you're out at a park this weekend. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the history around you, and we'll catch you next time.